Welcome to the 32nd episode of Tokenizing Everything, our weekly interview series with thought leaders in the blockchain industry. Today's guest is Dr. Dimitrios Salampasis, blockchain lecturer. Today, we will discuss blockchain in academia. Before we begin, I have to mention that everything we discuss is solely personal and does not reflect the opinion of Amazing Blocks or any other involved party. So it's a pleasure to have you here today, Dimitrios. How are you?
Hello, and good morning from Melbourne, Australia. Nice to be with you today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Would you like to start by just giving a brief overview of who you are and kind of where your angle is from in the blockchain sector?
Right. I come from Australia. I'm Greek by origin, and I relocated to Australia about 4.5 years ago. I am a lecturer of fintech innovation and entrepreneurship at the Swinburne University of Technology, and I'm also a director for the Masters of Financial Technologies, which was the first fintech-related postgraduate qualification in Australia. Before coming to Australia, I have lived and worked in a number of countries, and with my last one in Luxembourg. I've worked in the private sector, in the public sector. I have also had my own ventures from the advisory space. So I've got a bit of a diverse background, both educational but also professional. And this particular hybrid approach is quite interesting, I think, for a space that is moving so quickly, which is fintech, including, of course, the overall conversation that we're going to be having about blockchain. And as a person working in academia, I lecture, I do research, I do a lot of industry engagement, I talk to conferences, I publish, I do a lot of conversations with thought leaders around the globe. I'm also a visiting professor at the University of Quebec in Canada, and also a blockchain and fintech fellow at the Singapore University of Social Sciences, and a visiting professor at the School of Management in Fribourg. So I've got a bit of a global view in the broader concept of entrepreneurship and innovation, with a special focus on fintech and financial technologies. Part of my role is basically to have a broader overview of what is happening in the space globally, and try to bring that in my research, in my teaching, and inform new ways of capturing that and bringing that in class, which is fascinating. And at the same time, it also incurs a number of interesting challenges, which we can talk about it for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very much looking forward to this. So you already mentioned it. You have a very diverse CV. So when I looked at your CV, I saw that you've been an aircraft man before. You have had so many different sectors, that you touched on. If you look at your CV, is there one specific aspect that you would like to highlight, single out, that interests you the most, or is it just kind of a broad perspective for you?
Look, looking back, I think every single situation has two coins. In my case, I was always eager to explore. I was always eager to experiment. I was always eager to learn. This is why, if you see my profile and if you see also my story, it's not stable at all. That's why I've lived in different countries. That's why I've got a diverse educational background. I've worked across a number of industries, but all of them had the common denominator of exploration and the common denominator of learning by doing. And I think these experiences that I have accumulated, this hybridity, when I bring it back to class, and when I bring it also with talking, with engagement, it also helps me talk across multiple worlds and be able to host conversations with multiple stakeholders, which is really important and really interesting. Of course, it might have a bit of challenging with the fact that you don't really have a one side of deep dive. But at the same time, I think it's interesting because you have a horizontal approach on the knowledge, and also you can actually specify the areas that you wish also to take a deep dive into. In the fintech space, that is a bit difficult though, because it's just a broad space, and when you're also an educator, you are expected to have as much of a broad view as possible. And when it comes to drilling down to research, it's also quite difficult because people have the perception that when you are in the fintech space, you basically cover everything and you know everything. So people come to me to give them, let's say, financial advice on investing in crypto, or, you know, talk about different business models in banking, or talk about new insurance models, or talk about the role of quantum computing in financial services, which are topics which are very interesting, but each one of them is a massive pool of knowledge and a massive pool of experience. And trying to bring that in class and create curriculum out of all that, that's fascinating, but it's also, if I'm allowed to use the word, it's also a nightmare for educators. So that, if I may say, it also requires a new breed of educators, who are people who are very forward-looking, forward-thinking, who are very active, who connect multiple dots from multiple parts of the world, who connect multiple domains, and who are able to speak and coordinate and synchronize multiple domains and multiple disciplines. And I think that's something which my previous experience by working in the private sector and the public sector, even when I did my military service in the Greek Air Force, it has helped me bring all that experience, keep my mental horizons open to learn. Because even if you are an academic, and if you are a professor at any level, you never stop learning. And especially in that space, that it moves so fast. It moves so fast. So even from a logistics point of view, with the fact that on every delivery of my units, I have to update 50, 60, or sometimes 70% of the content per semester. And not only just that, but be expected to be on top of all the developments that are taking place, because bear also in mind that I'm also requested a lot of time, you know, to comment to what's happening in the news, to give interviews, to be informed. And also it's also the issue that because there is so much information out there across multiple areas, and there's so much live information, and the information that is actually happening as we speak, it's also difficult sometimes to have a clear opinion on things unless you have done your due diligence, you've done your proper research. And, you know, as academics and as professionals, we are expected to provide that thought leadership. So it's sometimes we have to go and as things happen. So it's fascinating, but it's quite challenging at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine, but I have to say props to you. I wish when I was at the university, my lecturers, professors had changed 60 to 70% of their, you know, agenda per semester. So that's really, you know, great. So shout out to you.
If you come to my classes, you will probably never see the content as you have seen in previous deliveries, and also the assignments change all the time because of new stuff happening all the time.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and I think that's the way it should be done, right? Especially when you look at these fast evolving tech sectors. So speaking about tech, let's jump into the, you know, topic of the day, blockchain tokenization. Generally, when we speak about blockchain, right, people always have, or they often describe at least, a certain moment, like a wow moment, so to say, that really made them excited about this space, you know, that really made them realize, okay, I want to go all in this sector, or maybe just at least, you know, to some sort of way deal with it. So what was this moment for you, and how did you first get in touch with blockchain in general?
So I would take a step back and tell you that I started working in the broader innovation in financial and for financial services and fintech since 2011, when I moved to Luxembourg and to do my master's in entrepreneurship and innovation. So I wrote my master thesis on open innovation in financial services and the role of trust. And there I started exploring quite a lot the role of technologies, the emergence of business models, and I started working a lot with fintech. So with my colleagues there and my line managers, we organized a number of fintech conferences around the globe. We started publishing, looking in the space. And at that time, there was a lot of conversation happening. Now, at that time, I must admit that I wasn't really looking into the blockchain as a sole technology, but I was looking more into an umbrella coverage of fintech. However, when I started, especially when I came to Australia and I had to develop the Masters of Fintech and put together the curriculum and everything, of course, blockchain is definitely a big conversation. And this is when I started also learning, because bear in mind, I don't have a technical background. My background is in business, is in administration, is in management, is in innovation and entrepreneurship. So I don't have a technical background. I don't have a coding background or a computer science. But it was always fascinating for me, from an organization and management point of view and business model innovation point of view, what does this actually mean? And to be honest, it took me a lot of time to get some clarity around some key things, because, and I think you and I have talked in the past that even now when you talk to people about blockchain, the first thing they tell you is about Bitcoin. That's the starting point of the conversation. And that's something within the course I was very adamant to have that kind of demystifization, really clarify that cryptocurrency is just a part of this new world. So what really fascinated me was a philosophical question around what does actually decentralization mean? And for me, I think this is a key question that we normally fail to respond to, because even from a thinking point of view of living in a world where you don't depend on centralized entities, this is something that it's very difficult to process, it's very difficult to understand, it's very difficult even to imagine. And of course, there is a generational gap. There is a lot of conversation happening about people being more tech savvy, being all these enthusiastics about the fact that we live in a world where code prevails and it's the new law, or everything is happening in an algorithmic manner, or we've got everything in an automation manner. But I was always fascinated to see, first of all, what kind of problems are we actually dealing here, and also how do we move to a pure understanding and staying away from so much misinformation and so much of low quality information. And as an academic or somebody who works for a university that is meant to provide knowledge, to drive thought leadership, but also to allow students in multiple doors for them to be exposed to, it was a massive challenge to understand, and also not just to understand, but where to begin. So to tell you the truth, I actually enrolled in an executive course at Columbia Business School in New York, where I actually had the privilege of having a guest lectures from Scott Stronetta, who is actually if we call it the father of blockchain. This is where it was also interesting, because I saw that what I was teaching back at Swinburne was actually exactly the curriculum that Columbia or other universities in the US or in other of the world have been looking into. So it was more some sort of a confirmation and verification that, hey, you're on the right track. Because a difficult part also is, because particularly blockchain is such a multidimensional technology, if you open one door, 20 more doors will open at the same time. So it's quite tricky to see the lens that you're actually going to cover that. Are you covering from an engineering or computer science point of view? Are you covering it from a finance point of view, which is around crypto and investments? Are you covering it from an innovation and business models point of view and management point of view? Are you covering it from a governance point of view? Are you covering it from an ethics policy point of view? So it was really difficult for me, and of course I had to be in alignment also with the course learning outcomes on where does this thing actually fit? Because also bear in mind that, again, you need to have ability to speak across multiple domains. So if you talk about crypto, you expect that students have some knowledge about finance, some knowledge about investment, some knowledge about what is happening broadly. If you're going to talk about different business models beyond financial services, you need students to have ability to talk about strategy, to talk about business model innovation, to talk about entrepreneurship, to be able to read a white paper or go and audit a business model of a particular venture. If you talk about, again, cryptocurrencies and cryptocurrency assets, lots of things happening in the legal space, which is another massive conversation that we're having. So you open all these multiple doors, plus, because first of all, there are no standard curricula, you can't just go and copy paste from books or, so you have to organically develop material, go with the flow, and also find the right people to teach. Plus, in my case, what was difficult is because I had to have also a bit of a technical background, so I had to make sure that there is an understanding of cryptography, for example. What does it mean? What does hashing mean? What does all these fancy words that blockchain people use that the rest of the world doesn't understand? And I had to learn by myself, and also find people who would be experts to contribute as guest speakers, and you have been one of them, and we had a great session together. So And there are not many, because bear in mind that academics were really looking at quality. So I don't want to bring someone in class who will just simply do a marketing pitch. That's not what I want. I want someone who has an understanding and who can complement my knowledge, because students want to learn, but also I want to learn. And because I'm an active learner, I learn all the time. And it's also challenging thoughts, because also, and you know that even better than me, nothing is standard in that space. Because it's evolving all the time, you can't just say for fact that this is it. If you read, let's say, a legal document in the UK or in the US or in Australia, highly likely there is different interpretations. If you talk about cryptocurrencies, you will see multiple views, and things happen and change all the time. And believe it or not, students are informed, so they expect that level of thought leadership from you to be able at least to understand and hold a conversation. So, and believe it or not, this is happening within a 36-hour class, which is a face-to-face or an online. So also taking into account that a lot of academic papers at the moment are very technical, so it's mostly from a computer science point of view. But also there are some research which is really around what can it actually do, but there are no real empirical studies. There is no things that translate, this is what it's actually doing. So at the moment, what we actually teach mostly is experimentation with the technology that is evolving and we're trying to understand, and trying also to support the students capture what does this actually mean to be in the decentralized world, which I think is fascinating, but it's really difficult. I mean, my students ask me, can you show us this? Can you show us how a smart contract works? Can you show us this? Can you show us that? Which is great, but at the same time, there is not much resources out there for academics and for education. So these were some key challenges that I had to face, not just for the blockchain unit itself, but for the broader fintech space. But the blockchain is much more difficult because it's actually for me to decide what are the boundaries I'm putting. First of all, to be able to control the curriculum, to be able to keep the momentum of updating it, but at the same time, not overwhelming the students too much, because bear in mind that at least the course that I'm teaching is business oriented. So it's not for someone to come and learn how to code, or you learn how to code a smart contract and learn Solidity and all these languages. It's basically to understand you've got this technology, these are its value propositions. How do you actually translate that? How do you actually make money out of it? What can you use it for? What kind of strategies do you use, and how can you allow entrepreneurship, innovation to flourish? And that was for me the massive challenge in terms of understanding the space as much as possible, holding conversations and learning, but at the same time trying to bring as much content as possible without, of course, overwhelming and opening massive doors. Because I mean, if we start, let's say, with crypto, we can talk endlessly, we can talk forever. So this is something which has been quite challenging, and I'm sure other colleagues of mine in other universities around the globe, they're having potentially same issues. Define exactly what are the boundaries and what do you actually teach. Because as you of course know, blockchain skills is one of the top sought skills nowadays. But what does this actually mean? Is it the technical stuff, or is it the business? Because a coder will always be able to code anything. You'll tell them to code. But for me, the magic is, what value do you actually create out of this technology? But again, going back is really, what does this decentralized world mean? What will it mean, and what is it like? And I know, for example, you and I have talked about DAOs a lot. Decentralized organizations. This has massive implications for organizational theory, for decentralized trust, for architectural designs, for a new way of looking in organizations and relationships. These things haven't been almost not touched at all when it comes to research. It's only speculations at the moment. And this is also very interesting and very fascinating. So from a research point of view, there is massive opportunities to capture and deal with numerous things, from blockchain economics, from organizational side, from business, from everything.
Yeah, I think the key challenge, right, in the space is really bridging it, right, the two worlds. The people that do not necessarily have to understand blockchain, but will be the key, kind of players that leverage the benefits of it, right? I mean, there's always this comparison drawn between, yeah, the internet and blockchain in general, right? No one or barely anyone can explain the internet if you ask people on the street. I often bring
Yeah,
this example, but
exactly.
it will be the same with blockchain, right? And you mentioned
Hmm.
it correctly. While coding is probably, yeah, right now at least the most sought after, kind of resource in the space, I think in order to foster the mainstream adoption, it will be, people like you that kind of understand the tech, right, on the one hand, but can also bring the technical knowledge in a more coherent, kind of manner to the people that then will leverage it and execute it in their respective
Absolutely.
entrepreneurial activities.
Absolutely.
So
And believe it or not, there is a lot of potential and there is a lot of interest. But
yeah,
again, and this is a message that I'm passing, is we have to detach blockchain as a technology from crypto. I think
yeah.
these are two separate things. Crypto is another world. It's an amazing space to be. There's a lot of going on there, both positive and also challenging. But blockchain as technology is something very different that we really have to understand that.
Yeah, yeah, and most people don't really do, right? Sometimes
No.
when I take an Uber, I ask people, okay, have you heard about blockchain? And they're like, no. But then when I talk about Bitcoin, they're like, oh yeah, Bitcoin, I know that, right? So and they don't even really know about Ethereum or any
Yes.
other, technology out there. So it's just crazy to
Mm.
see how early we're still at, also in
Yeah.
this space. So
And of course,
what,
what is also fascinating, that people are so surprised that I don't invest in Bitcoin currently, and they say, "But you're a professor of fintech. Why don't you invest?" But it's different.
yeah, you rather invest in the technology, right? And
Yes,
the
and I don't invest
the
because I just don't
token.
have the time. I just don't have the time to follow that at the moment. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, investing can be quite challenging. Let's hope
Mm.
maybe AI can solve that for us in the future, right?
Potentially. You mentioned
Yeah,
Ethereum. That's an interesting case with Ethereum.
yeah,
What's happening now?
yeah, definitely. So let's talk about Ethereum quickly. What is your take on the kind of current development
Mm.
there? Do you see that kind of the ETH 2.0 update is actually going to bring the much needed change? Do you think other chains, which I would like to discuss in a second, also like Cardano, which do have a more gradual yet academic approach in
Mm.
regards to how they handle things? Do you
Yeah.
think that Ethereum 2.0 will be the much needed solution, or do you think it will just be or it's just kind of a desperate, so to say, desperate approach? Although I have to mention I'm an Ethereum fan, to kind of kind of
Mm.
solve the obvious problems that people are
Yeah.
facing.
I think my mind is a bit in the middle. I think there is always a bit of hype around all this and a bit of marketing, but I really feel that at the moment, if we want to have blockchain really taking off and being scalable, it has to solve multiple problems. And basically, I really think what Ethereum wants to do with its update and its upgrade, and hopefully this will, I don't know if, I think they said end of the year or beginning of 2022.
Mm.
That's what I have read based on their timeline. I think basically what they want to be a blockchain as a service. That's what
Yeah,
they want to do. And in order to do that, you need templates, you need technology, you need ability to have uh, interoperability. So the way Ethereum particularly was put together at the beginning, and again, all this is an experimentation phase, this was not scalable at all. And again, that's why we also see additional projects going on apart from Ethereum. But I think at the moment, Ethereum has the brand, has the resources, has the trustworthiness, and probably, I don't want to say it will prevail because you never know, but I think there will be some monopolization in the space, and you see it quite a lot with the smart contracts at the moment. It's decentralized finance. As far as I know,
yeah,
most of these applications are held within Ethereum blockchain. And also there is an issue again, I think, with the high fees and the gas
yeah,
and all this. So these are of course the challenges, but I think this is a much needed upgrade. So I'm very much looking forward to see how this is gonna work with all the
yeah,
shards and all these changes that they're gonna create. I think there is a massive opportunity. There are people there are brilliantly considering all these issues, because I think it's a bit of a rush at the moment to really allow for that potentiality, and you can't do that unless you have some scalable opportunities to grow further.
Yeah, yeah, especially, layer two solutions, I mean, have been skyrocketing over the past months. I mean, we had the DeFi hype, we had the layer two hype, we had the NFT hype, but it all kind of, came down, at least from my side, to that layer two hype, which is much needed, the scalability topic, and in order to actually have this mainstream adoption in the future, right? So it's really exciting to see how this plays out. So maybe curious, and this also kind of potentially relates to this week's Being Crypto special question is that what is the most interesting blockchain project at the moment which focuses on education? And here, I think you may have some interesting examples at that stage, and I would also be
Yes.
curious to hear your take on especially a blockchain protocol such as Cardano, which is kind of yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily controversial, but there's still, a lot of people in the space that say, yeah, Cardano is a desert, right? There's not so much development. And there's others that say Cardano is a cult, right? That's what Mike Novogratz said, one of the most famous investors in the space. And then on the other hand, others say they're just doing it, the right way because they have a gradual approach, they have a great community. So what is your take on the one hand on, generally interesting blockchain projects that focus on education? Potentially more even depths than blockchains itself. And then also as a follow-up, maybe what is your take on the approach that Cardano has in regards to publishing hundreds, or I think above 100 papers on blockchain before they actually have smart contracts live on their blockchain itself?
Look, in order to understand a bit the role that blockchain could play in education, we have to really pinpoint on what are some key issues that education is facing. And one of the key issues here is, first of all, credentials. There is a big problem at the moment with ability to verify credentials, to verify all this paperwork. If you wanted to apply for a university, for example, you have to provide all these massive documents, which is also costly if you have to translate them, you have to verify them, if you have to store them. Then is the issue of verifying your credentials in terms of where you have worked, things basically that you write on your CV. There are some interesting projects. I know, for example, BlockCert is an interesting one that basically provides blockchain verified certificates. And as far as I know, the University of Nicosia in Cyprus is one of the main universities that actually provide a blockchain enabled certificate and diploma. Another project which is interesting is the one that is called API, which is about a blockchain certification of credentials. So basically, through a QR code and through your mobile phone, you can have your full credentials, which are verified. And that's a one-stop shop ability to have all your credentials verified, and you can apply for jobs. So basically, all this due diligence is done properly. I know odem.io is a very interesting case because it's a decentralized marketplace for educators, for students, for stakeholders to have courses. And I know that they have their own ODEM token that you can purchase different courses, you can participate in different seminars. So these are, I would say, some interesting examples with the blockchain space. And just to let you know that in Australia, we have the National Blockchain Roadmap, which is focusing on 3 key areas on supply chain, especially in agriculture, credentialing in the education space, cybersecurity, and also regulatory technology in relation to KYC compliance and fraud. So education is definitely a space when it comes to credentialing that will receive a lot of attention, and I think this is something which potentially could work, of course, in collaboration with other technologies such as AI, machine learning, IoT, and so on. Now with Cardano, I don't really have much to say there. I think, look, from a thought leadership point of view, it's an interesting concept that they publish all these papers. Now, publishing doesn't necessarily mean you create impact, but they definitely create noise. Now, how much of this is hyped or how much of this is real of value, this is to be seen, but at least I think they contribute to conversations, they contribute to providing topics, they contribute to discussions, and they keep the machine rolling. So I would say it's an interesting work. It's just a matter to see where this is going to go, and this is where this is going to lead. And again, if we go a bit broader, this is an overall conversation. I mean, for example, right now, one of the biggest topics is cryptocurrency assets, about
Yeah.
regulations, about NFTs, is about all this kind of stuff, which, where is the actual truth? Where is the actual hype? Where is the actual value? And of course, bear in mind that particularly in that space, lots of this is driven by what I call the celebrity economy, which is also part of the whole conversation. And how much of this is actually impactful and valuable, this is to be seen. But the logic behind that, especially if you want to trade rights or have a different way of transacting with assets, from a philosophical standpoint, this is interesting. How easy this is to be done, and how easy is for people to understand that basically from an NFT point of view, currently we're in an illusion of ownership, unless of course we have some regulatory clarity, and how much of course is driven by all these conversations that we see globally. This is to be seen, but part of our job is basically to understand the space, but also provide meaningful conversations and stay away from the hype world, which we have to consider, but at the same time, this is not where the value is. And for me, for example, there are some very interesting projects in general with blockchain, and I love when I see, for example, business models that really try to tackle and work between blockchain and sustainable development goals and the United Nations sustainable development goals. For example, there is some interesting concepts happening around the seafood supply chain, or the carbon offsets, or the plastic offset program, that they use tokenization, they use different types of models. There are some, let's say, some interesting social investment platforms that connect investors with entrepreneurs. So they democratize investments, they democratize entrepreneurship. And for me, what's fascinating from a business component is the fact that it lowers barriers to entry. And that's the key value proposition of decentralized finance. It allows and opens pathways for stakeholders who normally wouldn't have a chance because of different reasons. For example, there are some interesting concepts around recording children's school attendance on the Ethereum blockchain and issue tokens of proof of impact. So these are some stuff that really make sense. And honestly, and that's my point, that's my take, these should be on top of the news. This should be out there, but nobody knows about this because we are spending our time on Dogecoin or all this stuff, which is, again, it's part of the conversation, it's part of the noise, but where is the value of this? Where is the value of all that? And again, and I'm really sorry to say, but I was so surprised when Elon Musk said we don't deal with Bitcoin because it's very environmentally non-friendly to generate. Didn't you know that? I mean, I'm really sorry. So
yeah. I mean, he actually had an interview like that's, I think it was from 2018 or 2019, where he actually particularly speaks about this topic, just to mention it. So, I mean, yeah, I have my own opinion on this, but I think this is another rabbit hole.
It's just that I feel that there are so many interesting points. I mean, I'm also thinking a carbon banking solution. As far I was reading the other day that rewards individuals to users of electric vehicles with carbon credits. These are some stuff that really have an impact to create change. And I love this kind, and I love this kind of business models. And if you actually try to dig into all of them, you will see there is a lot of thinking, there's a lot of innovation behind, and a lot of potential to create high quality opportunities that also create a long-lasting impact. So, and again, and Nicolas, we've talked about all this. This is because blockchain and all these technologies, what they also do is they redefine the purpose of data.
Yeah.
We live in a data-driven world. And believe me, and that's my personal view without any empirically tested results, that we don't understand the potentialities of data. We don't. And what is the powerful of all this data that is out there?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be a very interesting industry to look at. And here, I also had Manan from Ocean Protocol on the show, which is, I think, a very interesting project in regards to also democratizing the entire data industry and providing, access to it, and being able to, well, on the one hand, maintain your privacy, maybe, but also kind of continue to be able to monetize certain aspects of your data. So it's very interesting, but obviously no financial advice. So you mentioned a lot of interesting projects and use cases for applying blockchain. Speaking about tokenization, or potential use cases of blockchain. So speaking about just tokenization, you already mentioned a lot of interesting ones there where tokens could be valuable, right? And while I fully, agree with your point of that, it should be more focused on actually what value blockchains provide. I also do believe that, in the future we will have that dynamic token economy where a lot of form of value information will be in the form of tokens. So what to you personally is your most favorite, so to say, use case? I mean, it doesn't have to be the best one, but just personally, what interests you the most in regards to tokenization?
I have seen an interesting case with the fact that there is an interesting project, which I will not mention name though. It's related to incentivization of solar energy production. Basically, they are using a specific coin to promote such kind of solar energy production through different means, which I find it fascinating. And of course, this is part of a broader conversation around responsibility, around sustainability, around thinking on ESG criteria, thinking on how do we generate impact to support the environment, to protect the environment, to protect sustainability, and promote more of a conscious consumers consuming behavior. So these are the stuff that makes me really fascinated, and these are also some interesting business models that, if you look at them, if you look at this type of sustainable and responsible entrepreneurship, this is fascinating. And I would love to see more there, and I would love to see more investment also, more partnerships between public and the private sector, or more support from non-governmental organizations and international organizations. And I think there is a lot happening at the space at the moment. And also bear in mind that you know that very well, that blockchain as technology doesn't work in solitude. It has to be in interoperable environment with other technologies.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think there is a lot of fascinated spaces to look. You work a lot with DAOs. I think this is a massive opportunity happening, which also entails a lot of conversations on what will inherently change narratives which have been traditional for years, from the way we transact, the way we organize, the way we put together organization decision makings, even the fact that you actually utilize computer power to generate trust in a decentralized space. Even this as a concept, how easy is to process it? It's not. So
that is true.
I just feel, Nicolas, and that's something I say to my students, that potentially all these decentralization visions have potentially gone a little bit too far, that the society, the world, we as human species are probably not fully ready to capture that. That's why we see further hybridity, say stable coins, say central bank digital currencies, say all these blended and fusioned approaches to allow time on the one hand for people to understand what does this actually mean, see real hands-on application in their lives. But for me, Nicolas, the key thing is, how do you actually regulate all this?
Yeah.
And I think this is, for me, the biggest question mark. And if we don't have regulatory clarity, I don't think bigger players will actually be part of that. That's my take.
I think, I mean, it's a very, it's a crucial take, because a lot of the projects are like, especially in the ICO craze in 2017, they just didn't care about it. And it's happening all over again with the NFTs, as you mentioned it before, right? People are talking about ownership of art, right, in the form of just issuing a token, but there needs to be a bit more behind it in regards to actually fostering this. The same with
I remember when there was that ICO bubble at that time, and I was writing a book chapter with one of my colleagues and one of my PhD students, and I remember I was always receiving emails on LinkedIn for people who wanted to share their project and potentially put me as an advisor. So
I can imagine.
Because, and it's also, of course, you're going to tell me that we're trying also to utilize current regulatory regimes to regulate something which is completely different. And I agree with that, but you can't just jump from one world to the other. You just can't. There has to be some bridge, there has to be some synergies. And I personally think we're going to be seeing a lot more happening at the moment. In Australia, there is a call from the Senate Select Committee on Australia as a financial and technology center, specific call for how do you actually regulate digital assets and cryptocurrency assets. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot of changes happening at the space. This might also mean that many of these potential projects will disappear because they will be taken over by others. Maybe this will mean that all this time we were living in some sort of a sandbox approach or an experimentation approach to see where all these things are heading, and then probably we're going to see more mergers and acquisitions, more buyouts or projects that are basically left because there are no competitive dynamics anymore. And do we actually need all these cryptocurrencies that are out there at the moment? I don't know. Let's say, why do we need all of them? I don't know. These are just questions that need some answers. And of course, this will also depend on who do you talk to. If you talk to a banker, if you talk to a regulator, if you talk to a crypto fan, if you talk to a blockchain, let's say, enthusiast, you will get different responses. And me, as an educator, I have to integrate and bring all these responses and not just only make my own opinion, but also present all these opinions to my students and tell them, hey, this is the space, learn from it. And decide what is your position in that space.
Yeah, and I think here, generally in regards to, when we look at the future of the space, education is really the key, as in mostly everything else, right? In regards to also how do we classify the respective different, for instance, tokens. Most people don't even know the difference between a coin and a token, right?
No.
But they just invest a lot of money into them, right? And so it's just going to be interesting to see. And I fully agree, regulation is going to play a key part. Personally, I'm sometimes a bit worried, that even the regulators just kind of jump to conclusions without, actually understanding it. So I think it needs to be kind of a dual approach, right? Where regulators and innovators work together in regards to actually allowing a transparent and fair, decentralization of potentially the world's economy. So coming to the end of today's conversation, I just have one last question for you. Our listeners know about this. So it's always interesting, to see the different perspectives on it. So for you, where do you see blockchain in 10 years from now?
That's a very good question, and I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I definitely see it as a technology that can definitely have a disruptive, provide disruptive change. Now, probably not really yet into the cryptocurrency space. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more use cases that deal with other industries. I mean, I see, for example, a lot of things happening in the supply chain industry, in the provenance, and all these projects, which I think are fascinating. So I really believe we're going to be seeing a lot more enterprise uptake on such networks, probably private networks and not really public or fully permissionless. And I also want to see how this will be further interoperability with other technologies. And, conversations at the moment that quantum computing will destroy blockchain, I don't think we're looking into that space. But I think it's a technology that's going to stay. I don't think it's hype. There is hype, but I think there is a lot of opportunities in terms of, transactionalities, in terms of interconnecting with data across multiple areas. Smart contracts, I think there is a lot of potential there. I would see that in multiple industries, that they can really soothe lots of pains. And I think this is where the focus should be at the moment. Yeah,
definitely. And just from a lot
and DAOs, I do believe also with DAOs, I really think there's a lot of that, but I feel that we need more clarity also around the regulatory side. I think this is something very key.
Yeah, that is really a crucial point, and especially in regards to DAOs, that you want to not have a DAO as a security we want to have it as a utility, but how do you structure it then? But it's quite interesting to see. So thanks so much, Dimitrios, for this very insightful conversation. You know, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and also thanks for taking the time. I know it's late/early for you, but really appreciate it, and thanks for
thank you so much. Thank you for the warm hospitality and
insights.
For the opportunity to join your work, and I know you're doing great stuff. I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to catch up in the future again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, thanks on that regard, and to our listeners and viewers. As always, it was a pleasure, you know, to have you on the show, or you know, whether you listen to it on Spotify, Apple, or watch it on YouTube, or you're part of the live recording. If you have any questions in regards to blockchain and education, I'm sure you can reach out to Dimitrios. He's very helpful in regards to anything blockchain related or generally entrepreneur related. And if you have any other questions in regard to tokenization of blockchain in general, you can always reach out to me. And other than that, it was a pleasure to have today's show, and see you guys next week. Thank you.